Hi, welcome to Guitar Time. I'm Robert Knoll. I would like to talk about guitar teachers. Okay, I've been a guitar teacher for over 60 years now. That's a long time. I started teaching in my early teens. I'll give you a little history of me. Well, when I first started lessons, I was just but a little boy, probably about 6 years old, 5, 6. I had already had piano lessons and it didn't really work out. I had a little injury to my baby finger, so I had a mean teacher, Mrs. Earthbomber. She was an elderly lady who pounded my little tiny fingers on the keyboard. So I had a bad experience with my very first music teacher. So maybe I was just aggravating as a little boy. I don't know, little Robbie. But my mom got me a guitar. And I would always go up into the record department or whatever store she would be at. It happened to be Sears, as I remember. I'd be looking at the record albums because my auntie, Debbie, she would let me look through her records and gave me a lot of her records, the Motown people, and I was just always interested in that. My parents, I think my first memories as a baby, probably 2, 3 years old, was they had all these records, and I'd seen Elvis Presley records. I seen the cover of this guy with this guitar thing or whatever it was, rock and roll, So somehow I had some imprints, and when I was in Sears, I would go and I would look at the guitars. Well, it came to be that my mom got me a guitar. Turned out to be this guitar was over $100. It was a classical guitar by the Yamaha company. And I started guitar lessons with a woman teacher, a young woman. Her name was Jan Johnson. She was like a folk singer. She kind of like a Joan Baez. She did a lot of the Raven Gallery around Detroit, these folk houses, when folk music was pretty big. So my mom would drive me to Southfield, Michigan every week, and I would go in Jan's house, her waiting room, and into her little studio she had. And she was the best teacher. She started me on the Alfred's Guitar Book 1. And when I played my songs right, she would put little stickers on, and little notes and smiley face, kind of things, And it just made me feel good. She taught me. She had a way with me. She cared about me, and she was pleasant to be with. And even if I was aggravating as a little boy or whatever, she was really good with me, and I really learned. I actually learned how to start reading music with her. After that year or two with Jan, I moved on to the Fava Guitar Studios at the Green 8 Center in Southfield. A lot of old Detroit musicians would know about that. I studied at Fava Studios, and I studied with different teachers there. I actually had a voice teacher too at one time, but the teachers I had were really not good teachers. They seemed to be preoccupied with the world, the hippie world in the middle 60s, 65, 6, 7. Maybe they were on something, I don't know, but I was just a little kid and they made some money from me, and maybe I learned a little bit. But I went through several teachers, and I got on the waiting list for Joe Fava. Joe Fava owned the studio. Joe Fava turned out to be a New York session guitarist. He had 3 method books, the Joe Fava methods. So he was really someone to, top. And he was like 10 times more expensive for lessons than other teachers. Well, after going through several of these young guy teachers, there was maybe one that was kind of good. Joe Rosanova. I remember he was really cool. Eventually, I got Joe for a teacher, and Joe was an elderly man, but he took me through his Fava methods, and I learned how to read music even better, and I learned a lot of things. Of course, at this time it was the 67, 1967, and I had electric guitar now that I bought at Fava Music, Fender Mustang, and the deluxe reverb Fender amp. That was a Christmas gift, and that just turned my whole world around, because now I could play electric guitar like I was seeing the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all these great bands coming out, the Ed Sullivan Show. So beyond me being a really good student, I was also learning on my own. I was getting records all the time. I got a B.B. King album. I studied that, and I played different blues albums and rock blues that was coming out of England, a British explosion. Savoy Brown, the blues, Eric Clapton. So music, rock and roll was really happening, and I think I was really caught up in the whole thing. Of course, our little band, the Purple Plums, at the elementary school, we won the talent shows. We made a couple bucks at the jamborees, and I go, wow, this is cool. I got groupies. I got girls chasing me around at recess. Wow, this is great. This is what I want to do all my life. So I was settled that I was going to be a guitar player and a millionaire probably by my mid-teens. Didn't quite happen that way, but interesting enough, I went on to have other teachers in my teen years, and in my middle teen years too, I also started teaching guitar. It was first at a music store, La Prima, where I probably had 30, 40 students, different ages, and I started learning how to teach from the ways that I was taught. And from there, I taught at another music store called Wellesby Music, and I taught there for 5 or 6 years in my mid to later teens. And old man Wellesby was great to me. I had my own little teaching room, and I think I taught like 80 students a week, which, was like teaching 5, 6 days a week. I was making money, actually. Playing in a wedding band at that time, but I had played in a lot of other bands. The elementary school was the Purple Plums. That was the big hit, and then we had our band in junior high school, Stronghold, kind of political, kind of hippie band. So I had these bands going, my teaching, and I started studying from Dave Richards' guitar in my mid-teens. At Dave Richards' guitar, I studied from a man named Jack Moncrief. He was actually a well-known jazz bass player, upright player. But he taught guitar and loved classical music, and I was able to work on Segovia style, learning the orthodox ways to play, setting my hands right, and reading part music, Bach lute suites, which is still my favorite. Julian Bream is one of my top favorite guitar players. Christopher Parkinen, Leona Boyd, these wonderful classical guitar players. I was inspired by a friend of mine. His name was Chris Young, and he would we'd hang out in the park and get high, but he played great finger-picking music, like Mississippi John Hurt and all this stuff, and that got me into Blind Willie Mattel, and I got into John Fay, Leo Kaki, Robert Johnson, Big Bill Brunzi, all these great guitar players. Chris kind of got me into a lot of them. The fathers of the blues, the forefathers. So I was learning how to do all kinds of finger-picking blues. At the same time, I was studying classical music and playing very serious, very orthodox style. So it was great. I had nowhere to really play the classical music, but I went into college and started studying music, and psychology was my minor. I had a music store at that time where I was teaching. Now I was about 19 or 20, I guess. and my music story was going. I had all kinds of teachers, guitar teachers, different piano teachers, voice teachers. Had all these teachers, and I was teaching too. Then my luck changed, and because of my wonderful friend Eric Smith and his wife Sharon, he had a special change in life that led me from playing with the Motor City Players, Little Ruben, which is a whole story in itself, to playing on the road with Albert Collins all over the world and meeting all my heroes. So I did that for a good chunk of my life into my 20s and later 20s, and then playing with Big Twist out of Chicago. So that time I wasn't studying guitar. I wasn't really playing then, but I did learn a lot from all the teachers I had. Jack Moncrief was wonderful. When I first studied classical guitar with him, he had a sense of humor, and I loved his sense of humor. He would laugh and say, "Oh, I hope the girls don't hear you play like that. They're going to love you, you know, they're going to want to do this." And, we would just laugh, and he had a rapport with me because of his personality, and we could laugh at things, but then we could be very serious. I'd be playing Brazilian music, classical music, Baroque music, and the seriousness of it. So I started really caring about, when I taught later in life, about how I taught. Talked to a lot of teachers. I really know that from students, and hundreds of students that I've had over the years have come to me, and they've studied with this guitar teacher and this one and this one and this one. And they come to me, and it's like, I've got to start you over from the beginning. Your guitar teacher never taught you finger placement, how to play right in the so-called correct orthodox way. A lot of teachers I've found, and I think it's really, I would say 99.3% of the guitar teachers out there in just about any city shouldn't be teaching. They're just making a buck somehow. They learn to play guitar by who knows where, how, and maybe they're a good player. They might be in a band. They might have sold millions of records. Doesn't mean they're a good teacher. You can have a reputation, but that doesn't mean you know how to teach. Teaching is knowledge and reasoning of how to teach, using the psychology, the neuroscience, how the brain works. So I've cared about all that through my life. And I've talked to other teachers, and I go, "Wow, dude, you play good, you got a lot of students, but you're not teaching your students right. Not the way I would." So I get a lot of students that have learned. And then, of course, learning on the internet, online, they learn from this teacher and this teacher and this teacher. And these guys are just kind of showing you the strum songs or this or that. And they don't teach finger placement. They don't teach the orthodox, correct way to do things. You see, I teach the orthodox, but then at some point we throw rules out the door and we play any way that it takes, use our thumb, do this or that, play upside down, guitar behind your back, anything. But there is a correct method to guitar. So I have to unwind those bad habits from students I get from other teachers. And I go, "Gosh, I'm sorry you wasted all that time, Our learning online, you acquired bad habits. Now we've got to break those habits and move on, and we can do it." And we learn lessons that way. So I'm trying to tell you that guitar teachers are a dime a dozen. Great ones are very few. I'm not the only great guitar teacher. I think I'm one of the greatest in the world, really. And I'll explain why in another video. But there are good teachers out there, and there are some that teach the method I do about caring about playing in the orthodox way first, and then learning other styles and styles of other guitar players. It gets vast. But teaching is an art. Teaching is caring about the student, having a rapport, being able to laugh, being able to communicate, being able to talk about things, spending time besides the lesson. It's so much. So that's one of my raps on teachers, okay? And you know a little bit of my history now, all right? Yes, when I was little Robbie.